This week, we give you 3 inflation-proof metrics to protect your business. Oh, and happy birthday, McDonald's. Welcome to the Profit Cash Growth Podcast. This is the podcast for 6- and 7-figure business owners who are looking to grow a financially successful business. My co-host, Claire Hancock, is a finance director, chartered accountant, and entrepreneur. And every week, I'll be exploring guidance and frameworks designed to help you increase your profits, improve your cash flow, and grow your business. So why is it that we can never find a pen, Claire?
Well, I think that you take them all next door when you do meetings and then you leave them and I tidy up and put them in the pen pot that's next door. And so we never have any pens in here.
No. Does anybody else have the same issue that pens seem to just literally evaporate?
Yeah, you either have...
We go to like Jojo's and collect like shed loads of them, fill the house up and then...
Sorry, we don't actually do that. Like that's like the idealist to go collect loads of free pens, but we're not that sad. We can't afford pens. But I find... We either have pens galore or no pens. When you find a really good pen as well, it's so satisfying.
I ask one other question. Can we have party food when we're recording the podcast every week? Please.
You are currently sitting there eating your way through an M&S. What is it, like a Thai prawn snacking thing? So it's like little prawn toast.
Triple prawn?
It's definitely not triple prawn.
Triple prawn snacking platter or whatever it is. Delicious. We're only doing that because I'm just trying to get my snacking in before we go to Tenerife, because we're not going to be here for a while on the run up to Christmas. We get to miss all the party food stuff, which is the only thing I miss about that run up to Christmas. So I'm just cramming it in now, aren't I?
Yeah, I mean, we don't share the same love of this type of food, but there we go. I think it's utter junk food and we don't need to eat it.
Party food anyway. Pigs in blankets.
Apart from that, pig in a blanket is good.
Yeah, well, let's see what this week's news story of the week is, Claire. So it's not really a news story of the week. It's probably a news story of the year, but I wanted to talk about it because it was fascinating. And this year, McDonald's is celebrating its 50th anniversary in the UK. It launched in the UK in 1974 in Woolwich in London.
I was shocked at just 50 years old. I don't know why, but I feel like McDonald's, like even though I've seen the McDonald's movie and I've read a book about McDonald's, so I know every time I hear just 50 years, it just surprises me how far that business has come in just 50 years.
Yeah, I guess that's just the UK though, just to be really clear. It started in America. You know, in fact, I don't even know how much further before, but
not wildly further.
No, I don't think it was wild. I think it was like, was it like a late 50s? Early, just judging by the milkshake mixing guy who was going around it, it felt like a very like late 50s, early 60s time horizon.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Happened. Yeah.
So
they opened their first branch in Woolwich in London in 1974. Obviously, over the 5 decades, the brand has grown quite significantly. How many restaurants do you think they have now in the UK, Claire? Total stab?
2,500.
Actually, you've overshot that massively. It's 1,435 restaurants. How many customers per day do you think McDonald's serve in the UK?
In the UK, 1 million.
4 million. So you've undershot that one. So 4 times as many as you think. They serve 40 people a second.
Wow.
Across the McDonald's brand.
Do you know what? I am fascinated by McDonald's. I am actually interviewing at the moment and I've had somebody apply that used to be a training manager at McDonald's and I am fascinated to, obviously I've got to focus on what I'll be recruiting her for, but I'm fascinated to see if their training really is as good as it appears to the outside world. And, you know, this type of skill set that somebody from the McDonald's world would have. Yeah. You know, you see it a lot with people that have come out of the army as well. Like the skill set that they have is just so transferable and so valuable in business when it comes to thinking about productivity and process improvement and optimization, and all of that leads to more profit and a slicker working environment. So
I think there's a certain discipline, isn't there? Discipline is the word, isn't it, that you get from that type of, or somebody that's been in that environment. I listened to something recently about people talking about, I was on another podcast about the power of actually being in a job in the corporate world before starting their own business. And I think I would 100% resonate with that. I know you would 100% resonate with that. People that suggest that, you know, they use words like job means just over broke and things like that. I think rubbish. I think you should lap up all of the corporate training that you can get to de-risk it when you finally go into business yourself. So really interesting. So back to McDonald's. How much money do you think McDonald's contribute to the UK economy every year? It's a really interesting one, isn't it?
Well, if they're serving...
To say they have a substantial economic impact is the way they describe it.
If they're serving 4 million customers a day, how much is each customer going to spend? Like a £5? I'd say there's a range of people getting like a Big Mac meal down to a coffee.
We'll come to this in a bit because we're about to do a really
So therefore, I'm going to say the average spend is a £5. So that's £20 million per day. Times that by 365. Oh my God, my maths. So 7 billion, 10 billion pounds a year.
£10 billion a year.
Look at that.
No, it's 94.95 billion.
I thought I got it right for a second then.
So you were about
Blimey.
nearly 10 times what you thought.
But when they're saying what they contribute to the economy, we're not just talking about revenue. I guess they're adding up the wages that they pay and...
I guess. I mean, the news story doesn't really say. It's just saying that they contribute that in economic output.
So sorry, how
they're talking
much
about supporting British and Irish farmers as well and things like that. So it must be all attached to that. 94.95 billion a year. 94
billion. So that's like 1% of our
entire GDP.
GDP.
It's insane, isn't it? And here's a bit of a random one. So going back to systemization, this is just a fun fact. I just picked this out of the news story because I just thought it was interesting. Did you know that a Big Mac in Inverness is identical in every detail down to the number of sesame seeds on its bun to a Big Mac in London?
I did know that about the UK, but it changes from country to country, doesn't it? So if you go to America, a Big Mac in America is different to a Big Mac in the UK because all the countries have got different food standards and you're allowed to put different things in your food and different portion controls and price points. And so, I did know that everything in the UK would be the same, but it's not the same around the world.
Yeah. So before we move on to pricing, because we're going to talk about how prices have changed since the inception of that menu in 1974.
God, it's like the great big McDonald's podcast.
I just think this is like...
We should have got paid for this.
It blew my mind because it's just so fascinating. You know, when you read these stories and you think, I just think other people would find that fascinating as well. So that's why I just want to go through some of the facts and stats. I'm going to ask you a couple more quizzy questions on this one. So how many employees do McDonald's employ?
Oh, in the UK?
Again, in the UK. These are all UK only.
50 million?
1.4 million. So massively overshot that one, but yeah. What year was the breakfast menu first introduced in McDonald's? So obviously it started as just a hamburger and fries joint. And just to give you a trick here, it was still a hamburger and fries joint when it came into the UK. So what year did they first introduce breakfast?
1992.
Earlier, 1982. So 10 years earlier than that. And what year was the infamous Happy Meal introduced? First Happy Meal.
1988.
Oh, that one much closer. 1986.
Oh, okay.
Really good. So anyway,
I can remember I grew up near Hatfield and there was a Hatfield at the Galleria shopping centre, McDonald's at the Galleria shopping centre, and there was a big like party area in there, and every time it was like a friend's party or my brother and sister's birthday or something, we would always go to McDonald's and you'd get the party room and the birthday boy or girl could sit on like the giant chair that was made of the clown.
Yeah.
It was bizarre, and you'd be sitting on little toadstools and everything was just like McDonald's centric, and that was your party if you're a kid growing up around there.
Yeah, I was the same when I grew up. They don't do kids parties anymore, do they? They used to like have the the upstairs out the way.
Yeah, you could actually reserve the area. And if it was one of the more affluent children, then 9 times out of 10 you would have gone to Roller City first and had a roller skating party that was nearby, and then you would go to McDonald's and have McDonald's afterwards.
You have far too much detailed memory of these things. So let's move. I've managed to get my hands on the first menu in that Woolwich branch of McDonald's in 1974.
Physical copy?
Not a physical copy. It was a digital copy.
Maybe that would be like
really hard to. I reckon it'd be worth a fortune.
Like collection memorabilia.
Amazing. Anyway, so they had like the basic range. They didn't have breakfast things, but they had some of the burgers and things we know, chips and fries and drinks and various things. So I've picked sort of 5 of the items out there. And I want to talk about the price on the menu in 1974 when they came to the UK versus the price today. So just to put this into perspective, because I think this is probably will shock quite a few people, I'll start by just telling you what UK inflation has been since 1974 to today. So 50 years. So the actual official inflation percentage from the Bank of England is 927%. Right?
So much money.
So 920. And do you know what's really interesting? I originally did this because I couldn't find this 1974 menu. I could only find a 1983 menu, the year I was born. So I initially did this on a 30-year. And do you know how much of that inflation number comes right down to about 380% in 10 years' time. So the level of inflation the UK saw between 1974 and 1983 was off the charts. It was like 600%. It was ridiculous. So that number actually jumped loads once I went to the 1974 menu. So if I actually did this based on the 1983 prices, it's really quite a bit more shocking than what we're about to see from the products we're going to go through. So let's start with the simplest on the menu, the plain hamburger, Claire. So today, a plain hamburger costs £1.29. What was the price in 1974 in Woolwich, London?
39p.
It was 18 pence.
Blimey.
So that's an increase of 716%. So the humble hamburger, has not even kept up with inflation in the UK. So if you buy a hamburger today, you're getting a right old deal, right?
Are you though? I would really like to see whether a hamburger looks
is still a hamburger.
Still a hamburger from the day, because I'm not sure that back in the 70s, when food was all wholesome, home cooked, proper, unprocessed food, if they necessarily would have
one
accepted
of these little flat things that comes out.
And the sugar laden. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, a hamburger does taste good on your Friday night on the way home from a night out. There's nothing better than a Happy Meal, but
I have to be honest,
really is not good quality food, so I'm not surprised.
There are pictures of the food on the original 1974 menu, and I've got to be honest, they actually don't look much different. They're not big juicy Five Guys hamburgers. They do still look a little bit wafer thin, as they say. So
okay.
So the next one is the Big Mac. So kind of a staple sort of medium-sized burger. Today, a single Big Mac is going to cost you £4.99.
Which is shocking. I'm so out of touch with reality, because I thought a Big Mac meal would be about £4.50.
Right.
But it's just something that I never buy.
Do you know how much the meal is? I haven't put this on here, but
it's about £7.50, isn't it?
£8.60 something, I think. Yeah.
You know that too well, Simon.
Yeah, that's what they used to call them, extra value meals. You notice how they discreetly dropped that?
Extra value, yeah.
They dropped that title.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Anyway, so the Big Mac, £4.99. How much, Claire? 1974, Woolwich, London?
£1.30.
No, 45 pence.
45p. Wow.
45 pence for the Big Mac.
So
you're
well, I'm like gasping.
We had this conversation weeks ago. Like, I love the way that you forgot all these numbers, which I was hoping was going to happen, because you're now shocked.
What I'm putting this in context to is, it back in the day, a Big Mac was like it was basically just over double a hamburger, but now it's 4 times a hamburger.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Which is interesting.
So, yes, so the Big Mac was 45 pence. That's a percentage of 1,108%. So the Big Mac has kept up with inflation and slightly beat inflation for McDonald's. So they're slightly winning on the Big Mac against inflation. So medium fries. So currently a medium fries cost £1.79. How much in 1974?
25p.
15 pence.
So again, that was cheaper than a hamburger.
Yes.
But now it's 50% more than a hamburger.
Yeah. Medium fries, 179, 129. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting when you look at how the ratios of the products have just changed today, isn't it? That's 1,000. So far, our highest inflationary increase product, 1,193%. So McDonald's are coining it on the medium fries. A thick shake. So standard medium milkshake that they do now currently costs £1.99.
22 pence.
Also 15 pence.
Wow.
Gasp there. There's a gasp.
Yeah.
That is now our new highest at 1,326%. So really beat inflation with that one. So what I think's interesting about this is that my gut, I think people's gut feeling would be that McDonald's is really good value, really cheap place to eat and all the rest of it. But actually, a lot of these, only one of these products has gone up less than inflation. All the others, they've managed to get more than UK inflation out of their products.
Yeah, however, I think if you drill down to the inflation of the individual products, like, for example, in the fries, potatoes are very known to, it's weather related. So you have a good year, a bad year, and therefore getting a stable supply of potatoes is very difficult, which means that on the years that there is good potato production, the price drops, and on other years you're paying an arm and a leg for them. So if you drilled it down to the individual inflation of the items, I think I would be interested to see what sort of pricing model McDonald's are following. Are they literally just taking cost and adding a margin?
Yep.
Or are they pricing at the point that they think they can charge their customers and sucking up whatever their cost base is?
Sure. What's the decision making that's gone behind those changing prices?
And was that different when they launched?
Yep. Well, I've got one more. This is the one that I've been waiting for. You can probably see where this is going now, but this is, can't believe this was on the menu from day dot in the UK, but the filet o fish.
This is balmy, because I don't know anybody that would buy it.
It's been on the menu for since the hamburger, it's the fillet of fish.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever eaten one myself. I mean, I love a fish finger sandwich. I particularly like fish, but I would never, ever go to McDonald's and order it. In fact, we might do this at the weekend just so that we can talk about this.
I said this about the
bit more
McRib thing, though, didn't I? And it looked
missed
awful.
it. Yeah.
So the fillet of fish today costs £4.89, so it's almost the same price as a Big Mac. Big Mac's $4.99, that's $4.89.
But it's interesting because McDonald's are now doing these new takeaway deals. Kind of, I think they're trying to rival the KFC bargain bucket thing for the family, and you get 4 burgers in a deal, and they call them 2 big burgers and 2 little burgers, and the quarter pounders and Big Macs are big burgers, but the filet of fish and a McChicken sandwich are small burgers. So a filet of fish is what McDonald's say is a small burger, but it's basically the same price as a Big Mac.
Which suggests that their cost base on it is a
fish
lot less than a big. Well, yeah. Why give it away as a small burger then? That's strange. So $4.89. What was that in 1974, Woolwich, London?
A filet of fish. Now in the 70s,
remember how much the Big Mac was? Yeah.
Fishing was very different. It would have been local fish and not shipped in from Iceland. And £1. No, that's too much. 60p.
Long pause for deliberate reason. 30 pence.
Bloody hell. What's that in inflation terms then?
1,630%. So the single, the menu item that has gone up the most since their inception in the UK is the filet of fish.
But that's fishing. And obviously in the 70s, fishing was starting to go on the decline when we were literally depleting fish stocks in the world and causing a general problem. So therefore they started controlling fishing and fishing quotas and things like that. And so therefore fish prices have become very expensive.
So thoughts, Claire? Any summary? Anything that sticks out to you there? So UK inflation at 927%, 4 out of the 5 products there have all grown by more than inflation. So are McDonald's doing all right, or are they still the cheap alternative that people think they are?
I think it's really interesting actually, because a lot of businesses, I'm not a fan if somebody says cut your cost base, but there is a market for businesses that can be incredibly efficient and have huge economies of scale. There is this sort of bargain basement price point, and you can build an incredibly successful business. We see that actually a lot of McDonald's products have just kept up with inflation. So
what's amazing is that you would have thought that over the years that their products would have got nominally cheaper. Do you know what I mean? As they grew so big. And so what's really interesting is that's probably why they're such a profitable and such an amazing organisation, is that like anything, the more you produce, the cheaper it should be produced. But they put their prices up by more than inflation. But you can bet your bottom dollar their cost base from 50 years ago to now they've got 1,500 restaurants and they're serving those numbers we talked about at the beginning, must be significantly less. So their margins must have grown exponentially from 50 years ago, mustn't they, per branch?
I don't know, because I'd be interesting to look at their annual report, actually. Maybe we'll do this one time and have a look at McDonald's. But it would be interesting to see what proportion of their cost is food cost, because on the face of it, you'd think that McDonald's is a food business and therefore their biggest cost would be food. But actually, I bet labour's a bigger cost for them, followed by property.
Yeah.
And therefore, when you're looking at maintaining...
Well, they own all their property. They're the biggest real estate business in the world.
They've still got to pay for it. At some point, they paid for it. So whether it's through depreciation, repairs and maintenance, business rates, all of that kind of thing that goes into, interest if they've got a loan, for example, all of that goes into making McDonald's what it is. But yeah, I think probably food as a proportion of their cost base is not what people think it would be.
No, I guess the reality is that actual McDonald's, it's the food where they make the money, because they sell the food to the franchise, because all the businesses are franchises, aren't they, at the end of the day? So
but if you take McDonald's as a whole, as in the restaurants and the franchise model, because they're not all franchises, some of them are run by head office.
Yeah, I think the majority of franchises, but cool. Right, let's wrap this into how we're going to wrap this up into this week's deep dive. So, carrying on from this story, we're going to talk about 3 inflation-proof metrics to protect your business, aren't we, Claire?
Yeah,
so this is all about linking back into inflation, pricing, and sales and revenues, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that in sort of the business or accountancy world we refer to as sales mix. But particularly at times of inflation, where prices are going up quite a lot, and therefore, theoretically, a lot of businesses are also putting their prices up as well, they're seeing what appears to be on the face of it positive sales growth, but actually a lot of that's down to inflation. So you've got some businesses that think that they're growing, but actually it's just inflation and they're not growing at all. And then you've got other businesses that are struggling to grow, if you like, because they're not able to put their prices up for some reason. So they're serving a demographic that just won't accept higher prices, and therefore they've got to think of other ways to grow their business.
Can I just sort of break that down to a real layman way of thinking? Because, it does get a bit complicated because people never think in real terms and things like that. But
well, just bear with me 1 second, because I was just going to say one more line, which I think would sort of sum up what we're trying to get at. And this is about really understanding what is driving your sales growth, because it's not always coming from that price that you charge people.
Okay.
Does that make a bit more sense?
Yeah. I mean, what I was going to say is that, a prime example is, McDonald's could sit there 50 years on rubbing their hands saying, great, look how much we've grown our sales or our price point of the Big Mac. It's now $4.99. It was 45p. That's amazing. But actually, there's barely any increase there. There's barely any real increase there in the profitability of that product.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. That's what I'm trying to say. It's the way that often people forget to look at things like house price. People get very upset about the fact that we are always hitting a record house price number, but in theory we'll always hit a record house price number because inflation will always drive that number to be the highest it's ever been by record.
Yeah.
So
I think the filet of fish is a great example where the inflation on that is like 4,000%, give or take a bit.
Yeah.
So when they're looking at statistics on that, filet of fish will seem like a fantastic product because it's outstripped growth versus all their other products. But actually all of that's come from price increase, and they haven't increased the number of customers that they're selling it to, and they haven't increased the quantity that they're selling. So therefore, is that successful growth?
But the underlying element is it may be that the reason they put the price up so much is that they now sell half the amount of filet of fish as they did 50 years ago. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly, so they're all interlinked, aren't they? So what we want to talk about today is the 3 different ways that you should be measuring your sales. And when we're talking about sales growth, I always like to break it down into these 3 areas so that we're very clear on what is driving the sales growth, because they work in different ways. Some of them are more appropriate than others for certain types of businesses, and some of them are also more appropriate for certain economic times as well. So we'll cover the 3 today. I'll give you some tips on what numbers you should be tracking and tips on how you can grow and things like that. So the 3 things that we'll be talking about is that you can increase your prices. That's obviously the most obvious one. You can put your prices up. You can increase the quantity of products that you sell, and then you can increase the number of customers that you're selling to. And when you're talking about sales growth, you should really be understanding which one or combination of those is delivering your sales growth.
Okay. And how exactly do you determine, is there a time to focus on one of these over the others? Is there a certain macro environment where one becomes more important than the other? What's your view on that?
So increasing your prices. So when we're talking about increasing prices, I'm kind of ignoring anybody that's put their prices up due to inflation, because I don't really think that counts, if I'm honest. That's just simply keeping up with your cost base. I'm talking about, if you're selling a pen today for £5, are you going to start selling that for £6, assuming that zero inflation applies? And I think that where businesses fall foul of this is that when they do the annual price increase, they tend to just apply inflation. So where it might be relevant for a business to increase its prices is if it's a business that's got some sort of cap on it. So a classic one would be a restaurant. If you've got a restaurant that's fully booked every night, then you're going to put your prices up, aren't you?
Yeah.
And earn more for every bum that's on the seat. So businesses that have got a cap on what they can deliver. So it might be a cap because even like something internally, an internal generated cap. So you might say, well, I can only list X amount of houses a year because that's all my team can deal with. And instead of taking on another team member, we're just going to keep increasing our prices until we reach that point where price starts to negatively impact demand.
And this boils back as well to your business model, because you can train your business model in 2 different ways, can't you? McDonald's, for example, have trained their business model in low prices, high volume.
Yeah.
But actually what you're talking about is, in my world would be the bespoke high service estate agent that actually says, I can only deliver this level of service that I need to deliver to 5 customers a month. So therefore, once I hit 5, that's it. But the my fees are X.
Absolutely. And you see this a lot, particularly in like the service-based industry. So, at Profit Cash Growth, we're one of those type type of businesses. We offer quite a high-end accountancy service compared to what you're getting on your typical high street accountants. So therefore, we are priced more, but it means that we're not going after that high quantity and we're not trying to sign up loads of new customers every month. Like in a typical accountancy firm, an accountant will be dealing with somewhere between 100 to 200 clients they'll have on their books, but we have a typical ratio of 1 to 20 clients for our accountants. So it's very, very different.
Completely different level of service. Yes, and you're pitching yourself.
Yeah, and
world.
Coaching is another example. You get coaches and, these really high-level business coaches that are literally charging like tens of thousands of pounds for their time. They just keep putting their prices up because they've got such a waiting list. They can pretty much command whatever they want to a certain point.
And the other aspect to that is those businesses are pricing on output, not on time.
Yes.
And that's the key, isn't it?
Yeah, so
any pricing on a result that they deliver for the client.
Any sort of business where you have some sort of cap, either self-imposed or external imposed. So restaurants is bums on seats, coaching might be the amount of staff you've got, all that you want, and you're reaching a sort of saturation point, then really you want to be trying to get a lot of your sales growth through putting your prices up and increasing your price point rather than, you can't increase quantity if you're reaching saturation.
And this all comes back to how much value you deliver for the customer, because if I take marketing companies, for example, this is a really good example of this as well. They have a totally untapped amount. So the marketing company comes to you and says, if I can deliver £1 million for you, will you give me 20% of it? You're going to go, yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's totally linked to them delivering a result that delivers so much money in your pocket, you're prepared to do that value exchange.
And it's also about thinking about those things of, you just putting your prices up is a bit of a lazy way to talk about it. Like if you're selling a pen today for £5, you can't just charge £6 tomorrow in a lot of circumstances. That's the reality. Yeah. We need to be a bit more intelligent about it. So it's what more can we offer with this pen that means that we can charge £6 for it? It's the Amazon model of next day delivery, or the superior packaging, or the unlimited returns, or the 30 days payment terms that you get with us over your competitors. So it's all these reasons why you put your prices up that means that you can charge more for the same product.
I heard somebody call this, they used to call it like USPs. Now they call it UVPs, unique value propositions. And it's that
It's an acronym for everything, isn't
there? There is now.
What was one with USP?
Unique selling. I don't think people like the word selling now.
It's
got a bit old school. So that's increased your prices. Are we moving on?
One thing that I just want to say on that is a little tip that when you are selling products in particular, if you are a distributor or even a manufacturer, where you're doing these sort of mass annual price increases or mass, twice a year increases, particularly if you're a distributor, this is quite common. So, if you've got like a retail shop, the prices that your suppliers will give to you will often go up once or twice per year. Yeah. And therefore, you pass that cost on to your customer. Whenever I've dealt with price increase, my background's in pricing as well as finance, we would always make sure that we pass that price increase on plus 0.5% every single year. So we were just getting that tiny little, literally like 0.5% extra on every product that's sold is 0.5% extra on our sales in a year. And when you're working in like a potentially multi-million-pound business,
that's massive.
Yeah.
Especially because every penny that drops to the bottom line, because you're not got a new cost against it.
Yeah, because 0.5% is £5,000, isn't it? Yeah. So it can really start to add up.
Great.
So the second one that we're going to talk about is about increasing your products and just, simply...
You mean your range, don't you? It's a range of products, is that what you mean?
I'm talking about increasing the quantity of products that you sell. So if you're an e-com... so if you're an e-com business, it's literally how many products you're shipping out the door.
Your average basket spend, all those type of things.
Your
average order value up, that kind of thing.
And this is something that I don't see actually many businesses tracking. And that's, I think, why this is really important when we're talking about sales mix and understanding where your sales growth is coming from, is if you haven't put your prices up for inflation, then it might look like you're not getting any sales growth. But actually, you could be selling like more products.
Yeah, again, it's all hidden in the numbers, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, you could be growing in terms of the volume that you're growing, but you're actually being outbeaten by inflation because your pricing isn't keeping up, and therefore there's another metric there that needs tweaking.
Yeah. So when we're talking about, this is typically, product-based businesses, it's very easy to track the quantity of products that you're selling. But breaking this down to, like a business like yours, for example, you track simply the number of houses you sell. That's a very easy metric in a service-based business. So if you're in a service-based business, you could also maybe track the number of jobs you do. So in your case, that's houses that you sell. In my case, that might be reporting packs that we produce.
Yep.
But also you could track hours, so the number of hours that are chargeable or the number of days that are chargeable. So there's lots of different ways that you can track output to make sure that you are selling more output to your customers every year, because that's another form of growth.
Yeah.
And this also links, if you're thinking about, like market share. So somebody like BMW, it's like how many BMWs do they ship out of the total amount of cars sold in the UK? That's going to be a really important metric for them to be tracking.
Yeah. It's difficult as well, isn't it? Because going back to your original example of, you sell loads more, but you're not making any more money. I mean, that's almost the worst thing to do, because you're working so much harder, but you're not getting any more money for it. So you've got to look at all these metrics together at all times.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I liken this actually to a business I was talking to the other day in self-storage, and they in the self-storage model, it's very easy to just buy more containers and bolt more containers on when you need to. Yeah. So they're like, oh, we're growing loads. And I'm like, okay, yes, but it's because you're bolting more containers on. So what is your underlying growth in the already existing containers that were there?
Yep,
because that's also what we need to be looking at, as well as what additional products or services we're offering to people.
Great. Good. And the third one, Claire?
Okay, so the third one is to increase your customers. And this is simply about finding more customers and selling more to new people.
It's the thing everybody wants, isn't it? The Holy Grail.
Well, it's often thought of as the Holy Grail, but actually...
doesn't have to be.
No, like in my business, I don't want density of customers. I don't want to have loads and loads of customers. Yep. I would much rather have higher paying customers. So for me, it's much more about the price point and the products.
Yeah. And there's lots of different reasons and things. Well, you have to think so hard about your business model.
Yeah.
Clearly, as we said at the beginning, McDonald's just wanted that metric's so important to them. Everything's about increase your customers.
Increase your customers.
They went for the systemization approach, and then they went to max it out, and that's their approach. But like you say, there are different models, and there's definitely something to be said about the model of high value, high quality, lower volume. And that also often comes with greater efficiencies, because those customers are often better customers to deal with. They're often, slightly more respectful in the way that they trade and various other things. So there's lots of different ways of looking at it, isn't it?
And also, you think about the practicalities of running a business. If you are only getting sales growth through new customers, on the face of it, that might seem great, but every new customer is a risk, because inevitably for every 100 customers you take on, some of them will just be a complete pain in the arse. Yeah. And particularly if you're not like a box moving business and something like mine, where you might be doing a service, you might find you've underpriced, overpriced, things like that.
Yeah.
So there's all these risks that come with new customers, as well as setup costs for new customers.
Yeah, and I bet that's something that's often overlooked by people, which is they price the ongoing, but they forget about how much work there is in getting that customer into their business and settled.
Well, as the very least, you've got a marketing cost, haven't you? And then you've got an onboarding cost for a customer. So if they have to sign a contract, all these tiny little administrative tasks, somebody's got to set them up on the system. All of those things add up to being a cost to the business over and above if you just sold another product to an existing customer. That doesn't have all that baseline cost associated with it. So there's a time and a place for all three of these, whether you're focusing on price increase, product increase, or customer increase.
And I guess it's a bit like a dial. You should always be aware and monitoring all of them, but there'll be seasons in your business where you will dial up the focus on a certain one of them and dial it down on another, or in economic environments where you'll dial them up and down. And that's the skill, isn't it? Is to know when to be focusing on the right thing.
Yeah, and I think most businesses are very good at tracking the headline sales number and saying, oh, we've grown by X amount. And it's like, okay, you've grown by 500k a year. Where did that come from? How much of that came from new customers? How much of that came from selling more products to the existing customer base or quantity increase? And how much of that came from a price increase? And we want to make sure that we've got a blend of all three. So like you say, depending on what's happening in the wider environment, in terms of the economy, in terms of what's happening with your staffing levels, in terms of what's happening with your overall strategy, your cash flow, all of these things go into that to say, okay, which lever do we want to pull right now in our business?
Okay, yeah. Amazing. That was
that was better than you thought that was going to be, wasn't it?
I genuinely didn't want to say that live on the podcast, because that's like, it feels a little bit undermining, but like I was like, I didn't think this was going to be quite as impactful this episode as you've just made it, but I really did like it. Oh, I've loved this. I love the McDonald's bit. I knew I'd leave the McDonald's bit, but that was really fascinating, Claire. Thanks for that.
So make sure that in your month-end reporting, you just have a slide called sales mix, and you're breaking down your sales growth between your price increases, your quantity increases, and the volume of customers that you're serving.
Perfect. Thank you again, Claire. And let's find out what I've got for you in this week's Profit Cash Growth Extra. So this is a bit about Apple. So Apple, I would say, being one of the great innovating companies, have probably gone a little bit like flat in previous years. And I'm really excited because they've done a new iOS update on the iPhone. I'm sorry for anybody that's not got an iPhone, because this isn't going to help you. And the last time they did that, the last few times they did it, it looked a bit different. There's no new features that are really exciting. There is some really cool new features. So I'm going to give you one key one today that you may not be aware of that I'm really liking, my team are really liking, and that is call recording. So you now have the ability, live in the middle of a call, to tap a button and start recording the call. The call then records there on in, saves the recording in your notes app in the iPhone, and then you can export that or whatever else. So this is fantastic for businesses. All my team have always worked on mobiles, not landlines. And we do have times where we want to have a very specific call with somebody that we know could be controversial or could be held back at us. And we want the opportunity to say to that person, just let you know this call is going to be recorded. Now, it doesn't do this discreetly. So just before you go and do it, don't just whack the button in the middle of a call.
It does announce this call is now being recorded.
It does. But I think I've not looked at the settings. I think you can set it up to permanently do it for everyone. So I rang somebody the other day and it told me before they picked up the phone, this call is going to be recorded. And then they picked up the phone. Yeah. So really interesting, but I think a useful tool. I don't think we need to go full Big Brother and start recording every single call that we're ever having.
But some industries, legally, you have to. If you work in insurance or some of these online selling things like currency, I work with a currency broker, legally they have to record all of their calls. So for some businesses, I think that this really is quite an interesting shift in Apple's focus, because a lot of its focus has been around consuming and how people use their phone to support their life. But the latest updates very much seem to be business focused, which is quite interesting.
Indeed. So check that out, call recording, and do keep tuned in the coming weeks where I'm going to be revealing, if you haven't found them already, some of the other features on the new iOS that I like as well that are changing my life. So thanks for joining us for another podcast this week. As always, if you feel like you may have outgrown your current accountant and you'd like to chat with Claire and the team at Profit Cash Growth, you can go to the website profitcashgrowth.com. You check us out on the YouTube channel. Obviously, hit the follow button on the podcast app, whatever you listen to it on, so that we can update you every week. We have more and more fascinating episodes, and of course dive through the back catalogue. It is an educational podcast, so that all of the back catalogue is very evergreen, especially in the deep dives, for you to sort of upskill your business finance knowledge. And as always, please rate, review and subscribe, and just text this episode just to your mate who owns another business, and say, do you know what, Simon said this episode's better than he thought it was going to be. We'll see you again next week.